chosen one. If these words have found their way to you, it is not by accident. You may have felt a strange pull, an urge to click, to listen, even though you weren't searching for anything in particular. But your soul was. Your spirit has always been listening, watching for the sign, waiting for the whisper that would remind you of what you once knew but had forgotten. This is not a message. It is a memory returning, a remembering of who you are, and why you've always felt different. Do you remember the moments when you looked around and wondered why everything felt out of place? Why everyone else seemed to fit into patterns you could never accept? Do you remember the loneliness that crept in? Not because you were unloved, but because you were unrecognized. That ache in your heart was not confusion, it was calling. And this calling was not born in this lifetime alone. No. Chosen one. You were set apart long before you were born. You were written into this world with purpose, sealed with divine timing, hidden until the appointed moment. And now, that moment is beginning to stir. The veil is thinning. You are starting to feel again things you cannot explain, emotions that rise from nowhere, dreams that carry messages too vivid to ignore. These are not coincidences. These are the early tremors of your soul awakening. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are not too late. You are simply arriving exactly when you were meant to. And perhaps, in the silence of sleepless nights, you've asked, why do I feel so different? The answer is, because you are. You carry codes inside you, truths that others are not yet ready to hear. Light the darkness has tried to silence. You have walked through pain, not as punishment, but as preparation. The isolation you've endured was not rejection. It was refinement. Heaven has hidden you in plain sight. Not to delay your purpose, but to protect it. You were not created to blend in. You were not meant to live a life of smallness. That discontent, that divine restlessness inside of you, is sacred. It's the mark of a soul that remembers it was made for more. The pain you've carried, the heaviness in your chest, the longing for something that can't be named, it has all been the proof of a destiny you can no longer deny. And now, as you listen, you are not just hearing words. Your spirit is responding. You are feeling something shift inside you. A knowing, a quickening, a realignment. You are not alone, and you never were. You were simply waiting for this, the return of the call. So let this be clear, you are not watching this by chance. You have been summoned, and not everyone hears the call. But you did, because deep within, the ancient part of your soul recognized this moment. This is the turning point. This is the hour your memory begins to awaken. You were chosen not because of perfection, not because of popularity, but because of the light you carry. A light the world needs. A light that is now ready to rise. Chosen one. Let's be honest. There were seasons when you questioned if something was wrong with you. You watched others move through life with ease, following rules you didn't agree with, pretending joy you could never replicate. And so, you silenced your questions. You tried to blend in, to laugh when they laughed, to chase what they chased. But even in your pretending, something deep within you remained untouched. There was a knowing that refused to go numb, a small, stubborn light that flickered through your confusion. The truth is, you never truly belonged to the world you were born into. You were placed here. Yes, but not to become it. You came with something different inside of you, a different rhythm, a different seeing. And while others were taught to forget who they were, you were born with the ache to remember. That ache, the restlessness, the quiet sorrow, the sense that something was always missing. It wasn't weakness. It was your soul's resistance to forgetting. It was the divine thread tying you to your higher calling, even when you didn't yet know its name. And yet, in the early years, this made you feel defective, misplaced. Why did joy feel so fleeting? Why did certain rooms make you feel small? Why did your questions go unanswered? Your sensitivities misunderstood? Your longings dismissed as foolishness? There were moments when you withdrew, not out of pride, but preservation. You couldn't explain the weight you carried, the way your heart cracked open without cause. You may have cried behind closed doors, begged for clarity, wondered why you couldn't just be normal. But chosen one, your pain was never proof of your failure. It was evidence of your depth. You were never fragile, you were finely tuned. And what felt like breaking was really the beginning of becoming. No one told you this, that being chosen rarely feels like a reward at first. It feels like exile, like loneliness, like wandering through a world where no one speaks your language. But what you thought was rejection was actually redirection. The places you didn't fit were not your punishment, they were your protection. You were not being cast out, you were being preserved, hidden, shielded, because your purpose was too sacred to be mishandled. Heaven allowed your isolation, not to shame you, but to shape you, because before a soul can rise, it must first go underground, like a seed that must disappear into the dark before it ever touches the sky. This is why the crowd could not keep you, why the shallow could not satisfy you, why your heart kept whispering, "There is more than this." And you were right. There is. You are. More than the stories you were handed, more than the silence you endured, more than the versions of yourself you outgrew. Everything you lost was not a loss. It was an unveiling, a holy dismantling, because the false must fall apart before the true can rise. You were being stripped, not to be punished, but to be purified, to be softened, to be returned to the rawness of who you really are. And though it hurt, though the nights were long and the answers were silent, you were never forgotten. The divine has watched over you in every unseen moment, every time you cried alone, every time you stood on the edge of surrender, every time you almost gave up but didn't. You were being remembered, even when you felt erased. And now, as you begin to awaken, you're starting to understand you weren't abandoned. You were being aligned. You weren't being punished. You were being prepared. You were never lost. You were simply walking the path all chosen ones must walk before they rise. And now, the time of hiding is ending. The time of remembering has begun. Chosen one. You've probably carried that question for years, whispered it in the dark, written it in the pages of journals never read by anyone but your soul. Why am I like this? Why do you feel things so deeply when others seem to brush past life's weight with ease? Why do your dreams carry layers of meaning, images that linger, emotions that ache like old memories? Why do crowds exhaust you? Shallow conversations bore you, and small talk feel like sandpaper against your spirit. These are not flaws. They are signals. You are different. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something ancient lives in you. Something sacred. You were never made for the surface. You were designed for depth. You were never meant to follow the path of many. You were always meant to carve a path of your own. Your eyes have always seen too much. Your heart has always heard what others ignore. You feel the pain behind a smile. You sense the lies in polite words. You recognize energy before it speaks. And that sensitivity, that intensity, that weight. It is not too much. It is holy. It is your compass. It is the language of the chosen. This is what the world doesn't understand. That what looks like too sensitive is actually finely tuned intuition. That what feels like isolation is often divine insulation. That what seems like weakness is spiritual wisdom in disguise. You see, the world taught you to shrink, to tone down, to hold back, to question your knowing. But heaven never asked you to dim. The divine never required your silence. What you thought was a burden was actually your brilliance. The reason you struggled to belong is because your blueprint wasn't made to fit their mold. You were designed in another frequency, written in a different code. You are tuned to the unseen, aligned with what others refuse to notice. That's why you've always felt the shift before it came. Why you could feel the storm building while everyone else was still dancing. You're not crazy. You're calibrated. You've been sensing what others have been suppressing. You've been listening to a frequency most people have forgotten how to hear. You were created with what the world calls contradiction. You carry fire and stillness. You hold deep grief and great joy. You long for solitude and crave connection. You believe in miracles and have wrestled with despair. But these are not contradictions, they are completeness. This is the paradox of the chosen to be stretched in both directions. To carry heaven while walking through earth. To know pain and still choose love. To feel the weight of the world and still rise each morning with hope. You were not made to escape this world. You were made to transform it by being fully present, fully feeling, fully awake. And that starts with accepting who you are, not as broken, but as blessed. The ones who are truly chosen are never chosen for comfort. They are chosen for clarity. They are given eyes that see through illusion. They are given hearts that break for what is real. They are gifted with knowing, not to control others, but to walk in alignment with something greater. And that's you, chosen one. You were set apart not to be better than others, but to be more honest, more open, more attuned. And that is not an easy calling. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you approval. It will cost you the illusion of fitting in. But what you gain is truth. What you step into is purpose. What you reclaim is your soul. So when you ask why you are different, know this. Your difference is your direction. Your sensitivity is not your shame. It is your assignment. Your wounds are not your weakness. They are your wisdom. You were made this way for a reason. Because there are things in this world that only someone like you can see, can hold, can carry. The world doesn't need more of the same. It needs more of the sacred. It needs more of what lives in you. And now that you are remembering, now that you are seeing the divine reason behind the discomfort, you are ready. Ready to stop apologizing for your sensitivity. Ready to stop shrinking your truth. Ready to start walking not in explanation, but in embodiment. You don't owe anyone an answer for why you feel deeply. You don't need permission to honor your knowing. You only need the courage to live the life your soul came here to live. Because chosen one, different isn't just okay. Different is holy. And yours was written into you by design. Chosen one. When you look back at your life, there are probably moments that still sting. Doors that closed without warning. People who left without explanation. Opportunities that slipped through your fingers when you thought they were meant for you. And in those moments, it's likely you asked, did I mess up? Was I not ready? Did I fail? But what if I told you? None of it was random. What if the places you felt delayed were not delays at all, but divine protection? What if the detours were not signs you missed your path, but proof you were being rerouted to something higher? You see, God's plan for your life has always been precise, not predictable, not painless, but precise. And it has never been based on human logic. It has been based on divine alignment. That means some of what you wanted had to be denied not because it wasn't good, but because it wasn't God. Some of what you prayed for didn't arrive. Not because you were forgotten, but because you were being prepared for what would require a stronger version of you. You've been walking through what felt like wilderness dry seasons, where nothing made sense. People around you seemed to move forward, find success, find love, find clarity. And you stood still, waiting, wondering. But chosen one, you were not standing still. You were standing sacred. You were not being punished. You were being positioned. Your delays were not detours. They were design. Because destiny does not rush. Purpose does not panic. And God does not waste time. Every tear you cried alone had meaning. Every prayer that felt like it echoed into nothingness was heard. And every time you were forced to release what you wanted, something greater was being aligned for you. But you couldn't see it yet because you were still underground, still hidden, still becoming. The truth is, you were never forgotten. You were being carefully guarded by the timing of the divine. And that timing, though it may feel slow, is always sacred. Divine timing isn't measured by clocks. It's measured by alignment, by readiness, by soul maturity. And sometimes the very things you were begging for would have broken you had they arrived too soon. You thought you were ready, but heaven knew better. Heaven saw what you couldn't, what was growing inside of you, and what still needed to be removed. So certain doors didn't open. Certain relationships didn't last. Certain chapters didn't go the way you imagined. Not because you were abandoned, but because you were being recalibrated, trained, refined, forged in a fire only the chosen understand. That's why the waiting hurts so much, because your soul remembered what your mind forgot. You felt the future in your bones, but couldn't reach it yet. You saw visions of what could be, but you were still in the cave of preparation. And so you doubted yourself. You doubted your gifts. You questioned whether you had missed something important, but you didn't. What you mistook for stagnation was sacred stillness, a womb, not a prison, a season of incubation, not exile. And even in your confusion, your transformation was happening. You see, chosen one, before God releases you into visibility, He often pulls you into secrecy. He hides you not to punish you, but to protect the purity of your process. Because if the world saw you before, you understood who you were. It would shape you according to its projections. But heaven needed to shape you according to your identity. So you were placed in silence, in solitude, in long, lonely nights where no one applauded your becoming, where no one affirmed your progress, but still you grew. You endured. You whispered your faith into the dark and chose not to give up. And that, chosen one, was not a waste of time. That was the sacred scaffolding of your mission, being built brick by invisible brick. Now the fog is beginning to lift. The air is shifting. You're feeling it, that gentle pressure inside of you to rise. You're sensing it that your time in the shadows is nearing its end. And that's because you have completed something. You've graduated from one version of yourself. You've outgrown the room you were surviving in. You're not behind. You're right on time. God never forgot you. He simply refused to let you settle for less than what you were born to carry. And that kind of calling takes time. The kind that isn't rushed. The kind that rewires the whole foundation of who you thought you were. So that when you step forward, you no longer wobble under the weight of your purpose. So know nothing was wasted. Not the heartbreak. Not the delay. Not the silence. Every unanswered question carved out more space for truth. Every closed door redirected you toward alignment. And every no was preparing you for a greater yes that will not just bless you, but those you were sent to reach. Because your story is not just yours. It is a message, a map, a mantle, and you were not born to be ordinary. You were born to walk in divine authority, timed perfectly, prepared deeply, and released only when heaven said now, chosen one. Sometimes you need more than just hope. You need confirmation. You need to know that what you've been carrying in your heart, those quiet questions, those strange patterns, those dreams that won't go away, they weren't imagined. They were encoded. You didn't make them up. You remembered them. And the very fact that you're still here, still listening, still searching, is a sign in itself. But let me speak plainly to your soul now, because you've asked for signs, and the signs have been with you all along. You've always felt out of step with the world. That's not a flaw, it's your fingerprint. While others chased approval, you craved authenticity. While others numbed out the noise, you sat in silence and felt the ache of questions no one dared to ask. You watched people settle and wondered why you couldn't. You tried to be like them, but something in you always resisted the script. You were not designed for the mainstream. You were made for the river beneath the surface. That resistance was not rebellion. It was remembrance. The first sign that you were chosen is this: you couldn't fully belong to a world you were sent to change. Another sign you've survived things that should have broken you. You've walked through losses that were never explained. You've buried versions of yourself that no one mourned. You've been betrayed, misunderstood, underestimated, and yet you're still here. Not hardened, but soft. Not bitter, but searching. The weight that should have crushed you became the pressure that forged you. This is not coincidence. This is evidence. The chosen are often forged in fire, because their light must endure the storm. You survived not because you were lucky. You survived because you were marked. You've also experienced cycles of isolation, seasons where everyone left, times when you felt invisible, forgotten, irrelevant. But in those empty rooms, something holy happened. You met yourself. You began to hear the whisper of your own soul. You began to unravel who you were never meant to be. That solitude wasn't punishment, it was purification. You weren't cast out. You were set apart, hidden in plain sight, a seed placed in sacred soil. And when the time was right, you would bloom not for show, but for truth. There's more. You've had dreams, not just the kind you sleep through, but the kind that wake you. Visions, glimpses, patterns in numbers, timing too precise to explain. A name you keep hearing, a place that keeps calling, a feeling that something is coming, and you're somehow part of it. You've seen the same numbers over and over. You've thought of someone and they called. You've heard a song that says exactly what you needed in that moment. These are not random moments. They are divine echoes, signs sent by a greater intelligence to remind you you are not alone on this path. You are being guided, protected, prepared. And what about your tears? Not just the ones that fell, but the ones you held back because no one would understand. Chosen. 1. Those tears were sacred. Heaven caught every single one. They weren't just pain, they were prayers. They carried messages even you couldn't find the words for. And they were received, answered, held. You may not have realized this, but your empathy, your ability to feel others so deeply it hurts, was never weakness. It was a key. The world needs hearts that break open, not just minds that debate. You carry compassion not as a burden, but as a blueprint. The chosen are often empaths, healers, seers, because only those who have been wounded deeply can hold space for the wounded. And lastly, perhaps the most powerful sign you feel this message in your bones. You're not just hearing words, you're recognizing truth. Something ancient inside you is nodding, weeping, rising. And that's not emotion. That's alignment. That's the moment your soul remembers I was never lost. I was simply being called home. So if you've been looking for a sign, chosen one, let this be it. You've always been different, because you've always been chosen, and no one else has to validate that for it to be real. You don't need a title, a robe, a ritual. You only need to trust what's already moving inside of you. Because if it resonates this deeply, it's not just for you. It's from you. It's your signal that it's time. Time to say yes. Time to remember. Time to rise. Chosen one. Before this message ends, I want to invite you into something sacred, not a performance, not a requirement, but a ritual, a moment between you and the divine, a space to acknowledge what your soul already knows. You are not the same person who started this video. Something has shifted, and that shift is not a coincidence. It is a return. So, take a breath, a real one. Breathe in slowly through your nose, and let it fill your chest. Let it travel to the parts of you that still ache. Let it move into the spaces where you have been holding silence for years. And as you exhale, release the pressure to be perfect, the fear that you are behind, the voice that says this message is not for you. Because it is. You were called here. You were led to this. And you are ready to remember. If you are in a safe space, I invite you to close your eyes. Place a hand over your heart, not to be dramatic, but to be present. Feel the rhythm of your life beneath your palm. That is your proof. You are still here, still alive, still connected, still chosen. Now, whisper your name, your real name. The name only you know. The name your soul answers to. Say it softly in your heart, or aloud if you feel led. This is not about being seen by others. This is about being seen by yourself. And when you're ready, I want you to leave a mark. Not for me, not for the world, but for the version of you who almost forgot. Go to the comments and write this sentence: I have been chosen. That's it. No need to explain. No need to justify. Just the declaration. Just the remembering. You're not typing pixels. You're carving truth into the story of your own becoming. And if you feel moved, share a moment, a memory, a whisper, one time in your life when you knew, even for a second, that something was calling you out of the ordinary. That moment was not random. That was the call. And your sharing may be the confirmation someone else was waiting for. Because we're not just building an audience here. We're building an altar. A gathering of souls who are always meant to find one another. Chosen one. This is how the healing begins. Not in grand gestures, but in sacred pauses. In small acts of honesty. In the courage to say, I remember who I am. I remember why I came. And I choose to rise. So, take a moment now. Let this be your sign, your offering, your return. The divine is not asking for perfection, only permission, only yes. And if you've made it here, to the end of this message, then you've already said it. Welcome home, chosen one. If you've stayed with me until now, then you've done something sacred. You didn't just watch a video. You entered into a remembering, a soft unfolding, a spiritual return, and maybe, for the first time in a long time, you let yourself believe that none of this was random, that every ache, every delay, every strange stirring in your chest was part of something much bigger. You have not imagined your path. You have been walking it in silence for years, but the silence is breaking. What has been hidden in you is beginning to rise. What was locked away is now unlocking. You may not feel ready, but you don't have to be. You just have to be willing. Because readiness is not about having it all figured out. It's about saying yes to what you already know in your soul. And that knowing it's getting louder, more undeniable, more alive. So let this moment mark something. Let it be the day you stopped waiting for someone to give you permission to be who you already are. You are not here by accident. You are here by alignment. And everything in your life has been preparing you for what's next. Not just the beautiful parts, but the broken ones too. Especially the broken ones. This is not the end of your journey. This is only the opening chapter of your return. And in the days ahead, more will be revealed. More signs will arrive. More memories will awaken. In the next part of this journey, You will discover the first 3 signs that your divine mission is activating, that the shift you've been sensing is not your imagination, but a sacred initiation. Until then, keep listening, keep trusting, keep noticing what pulls at your spirit. Let the world be loud if it must, but let your inner voice grow louder. You're not walking blindly anymore. You're walking with remembrance. You're walking with guidance. You're walking in purpose. And I'll be here each step, each layer, each rising with you, because you were chosen. And this was only the beginning.